Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 6th Annual New Mexico SBIR and STTR Innovation Summit, hosted by Arrowhead Center's NMFAST at New Mexico State University's SBIR and STTR Assistance Program. My name is Garrett, and I'll be your MC for the day. Though a lot has changed over the past 6 years with our event, the core remains the same. We are bringing you an action-packed day of great panel sessions with critical information, an expo hall with virtual booths where you can find out more about innovation ecosystem supporters, and the ability to network with funders, potential partners, and technology experts. We hope you take full advantage of all today has to offer. For the first bit of business today, though, I would like to begin by thanking all of our partners and exhibitors, as well as the speakers you will hear from today. They took time out of their busy schedules to attend this virtual event and pass on information about their organizations, key facts about the SBIR and STTR programs, and how they can help move innovative ideas further down the commercialization pipeline. Now, I would like to welcome Dana Catron, Deputy Director for Arrowhead Center and NMFAST Program Director, to the stage to set the tone for the day. Dana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Garrett. Good morning and welcome to the 6th Annual New Mexico SBIR STTR Innovation Summit. My name is Dana Catron and I am Deputy Director of Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University and SBIR Program Director for New Mexico FAST, New Mexico's SBIR and STTR Proposal Development Assistance Program. On behalf of Arrowhead Center at NMSU and the NMFAST program, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to each of you. It's hard to believe that this is now our 6th year hosting this incredible event, and I'd like to extend a heartfelt thanks to everyone who makes it possible. Providing connection points and access to experts in SBIR and STTR is something we look forward to every year, and I hope you enjoy the lineup we've curated for today's event. As I reflect over the last 6 years of hosting this event and the 8 that have passed since we started our FAST program, I'm encouraged by the incredible support network that has expanded for SBIR and STTR applicants. This year, SBA's FAST program expanded to fund 44 sites across 43 states and 1 U.S. territory. As a FAST awardee, I can attest to the incredible impact these funds have for SBIR and STTR applicants, particularly those who are underserved or are navigating the programs for the first time. Before I introduce our next speaker, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the NMFAST team and the hard work they put into this event. I'd also like to recognize Del Mackey, who has been the backbone of this program for the last several years. Anyone who has worked with our program has likely experienced the dedication and expertise Del has brought to the SBIR ecosystem, and the team and I wish him the absolute best as he pursues exciting new opportunities in the new year. Del, your impact on this program will not be forgotten. Thank you for everything you've done to support innovators and our team. Now on to our next speaker. Dr. Dan Arvizu, NMSU Chancellor, was scheduled to open this event, but a conflict arose and he won't be able to join us live. He did, however, record his opening remarks, which we will play in a moment. Dr. Arvizu has a decorated history and career in advanced energy research and development, materials and process sciences, and technology commercialization. His distinguished career touched on appointments at national laboratories, including an appointment as the NREL Director, where he is presently Director Emeritus. Dr. Arvizu serves on a number of distinguished boards, panels, and advisory committees. In 2004, he was appointed by President George Bush and reappointed by President Barack Obama in 2010 to serve 6-year terms on the National Science Board, where he was the first Hispanic chair. He is an elected fellow of the National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Public Administration, and in 2016 received the Secretary of Energy's Exceptional Service Award for more than 3 decades of energy contributions. Recently, Dr. Arvizu was appointed to the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, where he advises the President on matters involving science, technology, education, and innovation policy. Dr. Arvizu has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from New Mexico State University and a Master of Science and PhD in Mechanical Engineering from Stanford University. And at this time, we will now play the video. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the 6th Annual New Mexico SBIR STTR Innovation Summit, hosted by the New Mexico FAST FAST program at Arrowhead Center. My name is Dan Arvizu, and I'm the Chancellor of New Mexico State University. where I have the pleasure of working with organizations like Arrowhead and seeing how events like today's summit contribute to a thriving innovation ecosystem in New Mexico and beyond. SBIR and STTR funding fill a critical gap for startups with early stage technologies. But as we all know, applying for and being awarded can be a challenge for many startups. Arrowhead's New Mexico FAST program, which provides free SBIR and STTR proposal development support, is a great example of how New Mexico State is supporting early stage technology development. The program was nationally recognized with a Tibbetts Award in 2020 and continues to provide comprehensive SBIR, STTR support throughout the region. I'd like to welcome today's speakers, including keynote speaker John Williams, the Director of Innovation and Technology for the Office of Investment and Innovation within the U.S. Small Business Administration, and all of the federal program managers and organizations who are participating in both panels and one-on-one sessions today. Your participation is invaluable to attendees who are interested in many of these programs. I would also like to extend our thanks to New Mexico's congressional delegation, who have contributed to provide support for this event, and also to the Air Force Research Laboratory, who is supporting this year's event. New Mexico State is committed to the advancement of innovative technologies and is especially supportive of this work because it aligns so closely with our strategic plan, our LEADS 2025. LEADS 2025 strives to serve the diverse needs of New Mexico through comprehensive programs in education, research, extension, outreach, and public service. Arrowhead and New Mexico FAST exemplify this mission, and it is a pleasure to see our strategic plan in action. While we are disappointed we can't see all of you in person, this virtual format for today's event is allowing for broader participation across the nation. SBIR and STTR remain one of the best and only forms of non-dilutive capital for early stage technology investments. And we are excited to continue supporting small businesses as they navigate these programs and continue to grow and thrive throughout our entire innovation ecosystem. Thank you again for attending today's event, and I wish you the best of luck in your SBIR and STTR funding pursuits. Thank you very much. Good morning, and welcome to
A warm thanks to Dr. Arvizu for setting the stage for our event today. Now, before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to take a moment for some housekeeping. Though we will have some time set aside this morning for visiting exhibitors, please feel free to attend the expo hall during any part of today's event. We have some great exhibitors with a wealth of information and knowledge, and they would like to speak to each and every one of you. Simply visit their booth, find one of their representatives, and schedule a meeting to learn more about what they do. Now, it is my great pleasure to welcome your keynote speaker to the stage, John Williams, Director of Innovation and Technology for the Office of Investment and Innovation within the U.S. Small Business Administration. Mr. Williams' primary responsibility is to serve as Senior Principal for the Federal Policy Implementation and Programmatic Oversight of the SBIR and STTR programs across all 11 participating agencies. Now, prior to joining the SBA in December 2014, Mr. Williams served as the Director of the Navy SBIR and STTR programs. While at the Navy, Mr. Williams conceptualized the Transition Assistance Program, which is an 11-month program to educate and assist Navy Phase 2 awardees in the technology transition process. Commercialization of technologies developed under the SBIR and STTR programs was a major focus of his work. Through Mr. Williams' leadership, the Navy led the way in supporting the acquisition and transition of SBIR and STTR seeded technologies, awarding more Phase 3 contracts than the rest of the DoD combined. His career with the Navy spanned 27 years, including positions at the Naval Surface Warfare Center, the Naval Sea Systems Command, and the Office of Naval Research. John, I now turn the stage over to you.
Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate that. Joe, you're going to run the slides for us? There you go. All right, so my name's John Williams. I am, as you've heard, the Director of Innovation. Basically, I work at SBA and run a couple programs over there. So one of the ones we're really going to focus on is America's Seed Fund, often termed SBIR, STTR. We're trying to move away some acronyms there, but those all one and the same programs. We're going to talk about those, why they're of value. Going to give a lot of insight that's going to be more geared towards new companies coming on board and learning about the program, but available for any questions that can be taken care of in the chat. And we have 45 minutes, so hopefully we'll get some questions in there because I really want to address the questions specific to what you're interested in hearing. Go ahead, Del, next slide, please. Del? Hey, Del, I'm seeing the same. Yeah.
You should have a left and right on the thing you have there.
I'm not seeing a left and right.
Okay, give me 1 second then.
Yeah, I'm even trying to, because I don't even see the full screen or the bottom of it. Let me do something real quick. Yeah, I don't see a left and right.
Okay, stand by 1 second. Give me just about 45 seconds to get that set up for you, John.
All right, so while Del's flipping the next slide, we're going to talk about SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Program, STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer Program. We're going to go into the agencies and how they're different, but also how topics are different. I'm going to dig into a bit into the difference of an agency that mainly does contracts as opposed to those that mainly do grants. And there is a big difference, and that's one of the important things to kind of know going down the path as you look at topics and you apply to them. Granting agencies are very open. They're looking for ideas from the individual, and it's very broad on what they'll fund, where a contracting agency has a need. Typically, they are the buyer of the technology that's going to be developed, so they have a really specific need, and they want you to develop technology to do just that. And so you really don't have as much of a berth on what your technology is going to move towards, but you have a lot of berth on what research, what capabilities you're going to bring to do that, what kind of research, the process of how you're going to get there. But their need is going to be well-defined, process not as well-defined. In the first couple of slides, basically we talk about why do we have an SBIR program? And the SBIR program is set up to establish a vehicle for the federal government to put money towards R&D tech small businesses. So this is definitely a tech program, definitely funds R&D. It doesn't buy, it's not an IT type program. If you have technology already developed, it doesn't further develop that. It's really cutting edge technology being developed by early stage innovators, and typically in places that venture capital would not fund. We are not trying to duplicate what venture capital is funding. We're really trying to focus on what they would not be funding. And so that, it's in those areas. So you'll see topics along those lines. But basically back in 1982, well, prior to that, federal government or the Congress realized the federal government was pushing most of the money in R&D to either large universities, large companies, whether it's the defense primes, whether it's the Bell Labs, but very little was getting into and going towards small tech firms. And so by establishing this kind of carve out of 3.2% of their R&D funding that an agency would normally contract out, this required them to spend that with small businesses. And by definition in SBIR, what a small business is slightly different than some of the definitions used by the Small Business Administration. So Dale, you got my slide yet, or you're still working on it? Or?
You should see them on
I
your
don't.
now.
Is there a different screen I'm looking at? I see the on stage.
Okay. No, I have your slides up. I'm on slide 2.
All right, that's gonna make it trickier. Let me pull it up over here. Sorry, folks. This software, the government tools aren't as always friendly to different versions of software. All right. All right, I'm going to pull it up on another screen so I can kind of see what you're at. All right. So America's Seed Fund, yeah. So the biggest thing about America's Seed Fund is that it's non-dilutive. Basically, the companies keep the IP, the intellectual property developed under it. Government can use it. And so again, that would be more the contracting agencies will use the technology, but normally to use it, they'll have follow-on contracts, which we'll call phase 3 contracts, and you'll see terminology on that, to further develop it and use it for their resource. So let's go to slide 3. And so that should be America's Seed Fund coordinated, right? All right, we're on the same page. Then I'll start just going the numbers. All right, so my role in this office is manage the oversight. So SBA under this program doesn't fund or provide any money directly to the small businesses. It's all provided by these 11 participating agencies that I'll talk about, but none of it comes from those small, from SBA directly. So and so what we do is we monitor the agencies, make sure they are applying the money. If there's problems and challenges in it, we report up to Congress. We work with the small businesses and the agencies on issues. But we're really also, our 2 other major programs are trying to provide support to groups that support you. So the New Mexico Arrowhead FAST organization is a FAST awardee. You can click on either of those links to look at our FAST awardees and our growth accelerators. But FAST awardees are now in 44 states, and their whole job is to help entrepreneurs with the SBIR and STTR program. So one of the best things you can do is find out right away who that is in your state, and start to leverage, reach out to them and see what kind of support they provide. Often there's a number of programs and opportunities within the state that you may not be aware of, additional resources and funding to help you develop the proposal. And those are all the FAST awardee is the best person to reach out to find about more information on that. So that's the big role that we have, is really trying to push forward this program and make sure we have outreach to especially underrepresented groups that aren't understanding or aware of this program. All right, slide 4. So really, how big is the program? A little over $4 billion a year across these 11 agencies. Fund about 4,000 companies, about 7,000 projects are funded each year. And again, key thing is this is an investment. We're not taking an equity stake in the companies. And so this is a zero equity type program. But again, also doesn't really duplicate a lot of the research areas that maybe a venture capital would. All right, slide 5. I think I hit most of this. Developed in '82, really designed to fund major improvements. So not designed for minor improvements, late stage productization, not for equipment, but really first of a kind cutting edge technologies. I think that's important to know what it's not for as much as it is for, because it's not worth your time if you don't really fall into that right window. And again, reaching out to some of the presenters from the agencies, but as well, some of the your FAST awardees can help you through that. So slide 6, Dale. So why should you care about SBIR program? You know, as we all know, STEM affects every aspect of our life. Developing technologies was really important. Again, we don't really compete, but even venture capital there's a lot of venture capital out there, but it is really limited in IT, healthcare, and certain sectors. So we're really typically funding what more term deep tech, but material research, things that's going to take 5-10 years to develop. Now that's not across the board in a statement, but it is a lot of those kind of things that it's really that seed that's pre-venture capital that will get you into those programs and that non-dilutive. Slide 7, just to highlight, program's been around since '82, funded some very, very large companies that were small then. And most of the money in these companies listed, this was the seed money that started these companies. But also in industries. So US biotech industry, 11 of the 15 top biotech firms had their money early stages in SBIR awardees. So program, great return on investment, does a lot for the nation, and an important program. Slide 8. So touched on this, but again, why is it such a great program? It's non-dilutive. You're not giving up an equity stake in your company. And again, we're typically funding you at a stage early enough where your IP and the value of it is hard to determine because you haven't done enough research and validation to prove what it can do. So that's the worst time to really give equity away. So you'll build up capability, you'll build up and validate technology if you are going to go after other money. Maintain the data rights within the firm, funds work that others, that others don't typically fund, and there's follow-on awards, which I'm going to hit in the next slide on slide 9. So the program, you'll hear agencies talk about phase 1, phase 2, a little bit on phase 3. The phase 1 and the phase 2 funding elements are what is provided with the set aside. So each agency has to take how much their extramural R&D is. They'll take 3.2% of that and 0.45% of that and put it into a pot for SBIR and STTR, and then they'll fund awards phase 1s and 2s. It's a phase program, and I even have phase 0 here because phase 0 is basically the concept of helping you develop a proposal. Some agencies actually have phase 0 programs where they're trying to train and bring people in. SBA's kind of fast awards are phase 0 like programs. The effort for those organizations is to help bring you along. But then the phase 1 is actually a contract or grant you will get with that agency. Typically runs 6 to 12 months, up to $250,000. But some agencies like NIH typically go above that level. The 1.7, again, agencies and more the NIH, but agencies can go above that for waivers. So but some agencies that are smaller are going to actually award different amounts. That will all be laid out in the solicitation. Understand there'll be gaps between phase 1 and phase 2. You'll want to work once you get a phase 1 with that agency to understand the steps in getting the phase 2. But the program, one of the challenges with small companies that are totally relying on this program is there will be gaps in the program. You may not get the phase 2. It isn't always, sometimes it's multiple phase 1s before you break into a phase 2. Some companies over time will have multiple awards going on that feed off of each other. All is allowable, but make sure you understand that where the funding sources are going to come. These are typically 6 months to 1 year phase 1s and typically 2 year phase 2s. Based on that, the program allows sole source direct awards to any company that has won a phase 1 and phase 2. Now, again, this is going to mainly be those contracting agencies, mainly the DoD, that wants your technology. And so they're able to not have to go back out and recompete for the technology you develop that addresses one of their needs. They can go directly to you as a company and negotiate a follow-on contract of any size and as many of them. So there's no limit on the dollar amount of a phase 3 or how many phase 3s an organization can get. So go ahead, Dale, let's hit slide 10 real quick. We're going to fly over that. So again, 3.2%, about 3.5 billion, 500 million, been over that. Slide 11. So don't get too hung up on SBIR and STTR. We can dig into that more, but STTR requires that you subcontract. So still the contract is with, or grant is with the small business, but it requires you to work with a nonprofit research institution. Many times that is a university, but there are other nonprofits, research institutions that you can apply to. So it's a minimum of 40% to the small business, 30% to that research institution, and the other 30% can go to a totally different group, to many groups, or split among those two organizations. With SBIR, you can't subcontract any more than 33% of the phase 1 and 50% of the phase 2. In theory, the concept was that STTR was more about transitioning technology from universities and transitioning it to a small business and commercializing it. In reality, we see a lot of university engagement on SBIRs, and it's a much bigger program. So that doesn't really happen quite that way. Dale, let's go to the next, which slide 12. So eligibility, basically U.S. owned and operated, under 500 people, work done in the U.S. Startups, it's both for startups and established companies. It doesn't matter how long you've been around, but the work is focused on performing the R&D. So we're not purchasing equipment, as I talked about, and so it's really for technical work. So that's the eligibility. Slide 13. really does fund across the board because you have certain organizations, National Science Foundation, which really funds all types of areas of research. But again, with a focus on how it's going to commercialize, what's the business model that you're going after, how are you going to have a market, NIH, everything health, but DoD across the board funds things in health and energy and all sorts of things. So all these areas are covered. These are the participating agencies. The term market-driven and mission-driven. Mission-driven is those that are contract-focused. So those organizations have a use and a need for your technology, and they're going to do the contract. The other ones, Department of Energy is very interested in reducing the cost of energy, and they're looking for your ideas on how you would best do that. They still have topics in advanced batteries and specific things, but the buckets are bigger. And so often if you're working in the energy space, you'll be able to definitely work within the DOE, probably NSF almost for sure, probably DOD. So lots of opportunities depending on what you're working on. With the market-driven ones, they want you to figure out what your market is and where you're going, and they're not gonna, so it's pretty open on that side, and you're gonna be the one that's gonna tell them, this is the market we're after, this is why we think we'd be competitive, this is how we're gonna commercialize that. We're in the mission-driven contracting side. They'll basically say, hey, we're the market. So they want ideally you to have another market, private sector, but they'll be the ones, this is where we're going to use your technology and it needs to feed into this system. Most of my time in the Department of Defense, Department of Navy. So we had a need when we needed that company to develop this technology or prove it did or did not work within a certain window so that we could then transition it into an acquisition program. Typically, these were 10-year kind of life cycles of getting from idea to actually to where it's produced in a first article almost. Just real quick on slide 15, this is the dollar amount for FY22. So over almost 4.4 billion in these areas. This is how the agencies work out. So I think some important skills, slide 16, that when you write a proposal, really think, is this innovative? Do you understand what that agency needs? Again, really important here is the granting agency, contracting agency. Develop the plan on how you're going to develop that. Building the business case is really important. So even in the DoD side, how are you going to get that into the weapon, the product, to the members of the service that you want to get it to? So there needs to be a strategy on how you as a business would do that. Understanding the guidelines. So there's going to be solicitations that are rather extensive, but they'll provide all the details and information on what they're looking for in that application. Again, there's multiple registrations. These are places really your fast awardees can help a lot because they've seen many companies go through that and then kind of walk you through some of those things. Let's hit slide 17 real quick. So again, I think it's important that you think about it as a product. Now, it could be software, but really you are building something that's going to be used in some way, shape, or form. And so it's research for a purpose. It's not just advancing research. So kind of understanding who the end customer is, having a good knowledge of what they want, how much they pay for it, how big it's got to be, the life cycle on it. And doing some of those things is really important to make sure you're putting forward a proposal that will be enticing to them. If you don't have that in there, you're not going to get funding most likely. The next one on 18. So again, the product, based on technical innovation. So we're looking for advances in science that will feed into a product. There needs to be some risk. We're not, just funding an evolution of technology that's moved along. That would not be kind of risk-focused R&D, which this is. And again, commercializing that, which could be either to the mission agency to get it, to NASA, and to DoD, or to get it to the private sector, benefiting health, benefiting, other parts of the military. So there are a lot of agency difference and now the topics that come out, what their focus areas in R&D, when they put them out. Do they go out once a year? Do they go out many times a year? How much money is on a phase 1 and phase 2? Those are all things that, the more you know about, the better off, and you can kind of narrow down what agency is best for you. I'm going to kind of push through some of that. So again, I've got more on this contracting versus grants. These slides will be available to you. Again, as I kind of talked about, these contracting agencies, they know what they're requiring, what they're looking for. It's more focused, and they have a product in use available. I planned for it. And then with those that are more in the granting agency, really that's an investigator initiates the idea, the approach, but in the broad area of energy, in the broad area of health, your topics will fit, and they'll have buckets within there that you'll apply to. Slide 21. So again, contracting, you will be able to talk to the topic authors generally, but those topics don't repeat. So a granting agency, you can go out and see their topics. They will almost be exact, if not exact, for many years sometimes, because it's, again, themes and areas and big buckets. Under the contracting side, you may see a topic, you should often only see a topic once. They've then developing and working on that and moving forward. So I can get to some questions. We're going to move along a little bit. All right, so slide 24. Wait, I think I skipped too far there. All right, yeah, slide 23. So again, granting agencies, yeah, let's go to slide 24. So granting agencies are not going to buy your product. Their goal is to basically on phase one, you've got this advancement and idea that you're going to prove out. Again, it's not 100% on all awards, but basically, it's kind of considered more of a proof of concept phase. And then in phase two, they're really looking for you to develop some products and prototypes and things like that to really prove the technology would work in a prototype, but also really understand what that market is, what the need is. So I-Core is a program. There's other programs that kind of do customer discovery. Those are all important things to do, to have partners in some of these, because if you're developing a product and you're a five-man company, and you need manufacturing capability, you need to present to us how you are going to scale that. And some of that needs to be discussed in the phase one and certainly in the phase two proposal. So those are all important aspects of submitting strong and winning proposals. So granting agencies, so I think I covered, but in contracting agencies, you'll see something often with them that there'll be a pre-solicitation timeframe where you'll be able to talk to the topic authors. And then once the topic is officially out, it's different, it's controlled. So the DoD still has a way you can email, but those emails are shared anyone that's interested in the topic. As in a granting agency, they're more able to talk to submitters right up to the time you're submitting. So some of them have different processes for that, where you might submit a one-page, a two-page paper, you'll get some feedback, whether, yeah, this is in line, this makes sense. They are trying to, again, narrow down people that either propose whether it's unlikely that that SBIR would fund it, or to really narrow it down in an area that, hey, technology-wise, you're not there, or that's not an interest area, maybe you should try another agency. Those are all things that we're trying to do kind of in that earlier phase. And there's different programs, and they'll tell you about those, and you can find them on their websites. But you can also talk to some of their individual program managers to really and that's really strongly advised. Again, some of your fast awardees will be able to help you through that, but they all have kind of different tools to do that. But I think it's important as you build up understanding the requirements of that proposal, the need by that agency, if they're going to use technology in a contracting agency, do you really understand the platform it's going on, who controls some of those decisions, learning some of the terminology that they use are going to be key things to understand from their perspective when they're evaluating you, that, yeah, this is something that this company gets. They understand how we work. They understand what the market is. And again, for a granting agency, that you've done some of that homework as part of that early phase one proposal. What I like to push people towards, slide 26, is, how do you first start out? How do you find what agencies are right? How do you find out if these are the types of things of the work that I do that get funded? And so I always say first start looking at past awards. And so on this slide here, this is our SBIR.gov website that SBA handles. And so there's a place where you can search awards. And then as you do that, you can type in keywords. And from that, basically, you'll get the list. So in this poll, Well, I think this is the general poll for all awards. There's about 190,000 awards in this database now, but you can type in some keywords that you work on. You'll start to see what was funded, but then also the agency and when it was funded. So if I was doing these searches, I would look only in the last 3 years. I try to understand who's funding what in what area that aligns with what I do. I start to then narrow down those agencies and then who the players are in that agency. Again, if it's a contracting agency and they funded this in the past 3 years, maybe there's less of a chance they're going to fund it again, but you'll at least have an understanding of who works in what space and what they're trying to advance. So, who are the groups that work on advanced engine designs and materials for engines? Who are the ones that might work on radar? You'll start to get a feel for what agencies, components, labs within those DoD organizations, for example, are the players in this space. That's important to understand. And in the granting agencies, again, their topics will come out every year, so you'll understand who's funded what. Is this something that we work in and fits in the bucket? And then really digging deep into that agency, understanding when that solicitation comes out. Do they have, like NSF and NIH, have multiple solicitations that are almost open year round with different closing dates? So you want to then start to understand that, so you can start to lay out the roadmap of building that first proposal. Especially, it takes, I think you really want 90 days to, as a minimum, to really, from the time you're figured out and you're going forward, to being able to really build that proposal to submit it in time. So I think also learning and asking for debriefs. So, many times the first proposals aren't successful, understanding why they aren't. Again, I'm going to push fast in some of the groups like Dell's app, because they've seen lots and lots of unsuccessful and successful proposals. They'll be able to provide that input before you submit it on what are the areas where you're really not covering that you need to cover, or where it's weak or where it's strong. Next slide then just shows, once you kind of get that flavor, slide 27, on what are the agencies, you want to make sure, and then I always start to recommend, if it's a granting agency, you kind of know when that topic's going to come out, so you're really set for it. You set your timer, your calendar for, hey, they come out on November 1st every year, so that's my next solicitation, and so you're digging in early and fast. And the same then with DoD. When sometimes even within the DoD, there's 13 different organizations, Army, Navy, Air Force, MDA, and others, and knowing when they come out with individual topics, because the DoD may come out with 3 or 4 solicitations a year, but the Navy may come out with less. And so understanding that there are organizations within the DoD like AFWERX, now Air Force, and they have really broad topics. And there are other agencies within the DoD that don't have as many broad topics. So having some of that nuance, experience, and understanding just helps that, hey, these are groups I really want to focus on. These would be a good entry point, because especially with those that we're calling mission contracting organizations, part of that goal of that phase 1 and phase 2 is to get in there and really understand who that agency is, prove to them that you're responsive, you've got great research, you've got great facilities and capabilities and individuals that are running that research, and you're going to continue to build that expertise out. And like I say, from my experience, it was very rare in the DoD that one phase 1 to phase 2, and then a massive phase 3. It's usually over time developing capability and expertise that then is mature enough for the DoD to rely on the company. And as one of my old program managers used to say, this is kind of a program that, especially in the DoD, my experience was that we're trying out, developing that relationship with the companies, and over time, understanding how they can respond and what their capabilities are. And then the beauty is, with that phase 3 capability, that agency, that individual, that program can go directly to the company and say, okay, I know you guys can do all these things. We developed some of it. Now I want 70 prototypes that I can use here, here, and here, or products, or whatever they want in phase 3. Let's hit 28. So just going to touch on this a little bit, but it's, so we had a pretty rough reauthorization. The program has been around for 40 years and highly acclaimed across the world, really, and in every report. But the way it's written is it expires after a set period. It used to be 8 years, 4 years. So the program was set to expire on September 30th of 2022. So the same day we got a new signed bill out. So the president signed the bill on 30th September. So that extended the program for 3 years. So that doesn't mean the program is going away in 3 years. Again, this is the natural process, the painful one, but it's a natural process of the program. And part of the reason is let's continue to tweak the program. How can we make improvements in it that adapts to the changes? And so the biggest two changes in the new legislation was on due diligence, and basically the concern of foreign investment, foreign engagement, foreign control of technologies, especially those critical to the defense establishment, to national security. So there'll be additional questions I've got later that you'll start to see, and different additional requirements on the agencies to perform due diligence. So you'll see much higher levels of due diligence, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, especially, and less at a USDA and other places where technology being developed isn't a risk to national security as much. So this is really focused on that. And so, so there's going to be requirements on ties to what we call foreign countries of concern. You'll see there, which is Korea, China, Iran, current countries right now that, from a national security standpoint, the government, the U.S. has concerns over people from those countries being involved. There'll be some more reporting. There's a new requirement. The Department of Defense has to have an open topic in each one of the subcomponents, the Army, Navy, Air Force, MDA and stuff. So you'll see that come on. And then there's an increase in, there are companies that have won multiple awards over time, and you'll start to see, so there's always been a requirement of, if you get X phase ones, you have to at least get, so the old was for every 4 phase ones you get, you have to have at least 1 phase 2. Those standards, based on how many awards you've had in the past, go up. And so we're now looking at, 2 to 1 and things like that, and the same on commercializing. So those are the big changes that were made. I think in my slide, this is kind of those areas. I probably could have skipped the last one there, but again, those are the areas, we extended the program, foreign influence and things like that. Slide 30, Dale, these are actually, so what you'll start to see is new questions that are part of your submission that are required for you to disclose. And these are the 7 questions, not written, they'll be expanded from this, but basically these are the questions. They're really trying to understand if you as a company had any relations or have businesses with foreign countries. They're most concerned, again, about the countries of concern, but you'll have to report on other countries. So if you're not doing work, you haven't taken money from other countries of concern or any foreign countries, this is will all be no. If you've had some of that, you may have some yeses towards, you develop your business and you're selling some of your product to even Germany and things like that. You just have to report it. And then part of the evaluation we'll look at, does that provide a risk to national security? And so it could be a potential not to award, but again, it has to be something that we determine with you that there's a risk. So you're going to start to see those questions coming up. Actually, the Department of Energy already posted their questions, and the other agencies are doing that as we speak. So over the next 3 months, you'll see that rolling out with all of them. I think we'll just skip over this to get to questions. We won't have even much time for that, but these are some more slides on kind of, again, it's a risk-based approach, so it's not going to be the same at USDA as it will be DoD. What I do want to highlight, kind of closing, is we have on SBIR.gov a bunch of online tutorials where you can find out about each agency, how intellectual property is handled, what the phases of the program are, what these data rights I talk about mean, insight into each of those agencies to help you get a better understanding of what they do. So there's 55 of those, Dale 33. Again, I've mentioned there's 44 FAST, so almost, most states now have a FAST organization. Love to get it, and hopefully we'll get it to actually this is the old one, 33. So I was wondering, there's many more states, so I'm sorry, this is my old slide. So now there's 44 of them, but if you go to SBIR.gov FAST, many of the states, now we only have 5 left. So there's 43 states actually, and Puerto Rico. So that's an important resource, and I think that's all I had. So, Del, any questions from the community?
Yes, John, we actually do. So you kind of touched on this, very briefly in the last couple of slides there, but one of the questions that we had that came in from the chat was, so, the congressional report says that the success rate for first-time awardees is, roughly 19%. What efforts are underway to increase that percentage of success?
None. 19 is a pretty good number. So when I say that, again, that's not, so the reason it's 19%, and it varies at different organizations across agencies, our job is to make every proposal better, but that just drives the competition. So you have X amount of money and X amount of proposals going in, and it's ranged then between, I think, as low as 15% to higher than that. So what you find is if there's an economic downturn, our numbers tend to go down because we get higher proposals. But again, our focus isn't on that 19% or what that number is. It's trying to help first timers win awards. So what is interesting is over the last couple of years, about 40 to 44% of the awards made in phase one were companies that had never received an award before. So that's my big drive, is how do I get more companies trained, educated, and to write strong and winning proposals. Yep, next.
Excellent. And this was touched on a little bit briefly, but question, why did reauthorization change the commercialization requirements and kind of thresholds? And what does that mean for new awardees?
It means nothing for new awardees. So those rules are based on companies that have over 50 phase 2 awards. So, and actually, there's different levels of bars. So companies that have had 15 in the last 5 years, so there's different bars, but these are for multi-award winners. We want to make sure multi-award winners are commercialized. It looks over a 10-year window. And so, the idea is if there's companies that have been funded year over year over year, which there have been, are they transitioning and getting other dollars outside of SBIR? So it won't impact new awardees. Next.
Great. And so do you see the due diligence checks that you were just talking about slowing down the time to award?
Unfortunately, I'm concerned that they will, yes. But the agencies are working hard on how to do that in a parallel path. They're looking at, when do they do that? Again, some are going to do it on all the proposals as they come in. Others are going to do it as those proposals are selected. So you'll see some differences, but any added step has the potential to slow things down. But all the agencies are working really hard to try to put those as parallel processes and to not slow things down.
Gotcha. And another question here for you. You mentioned when you talked about the reauthorization and like the open innovation topics that the different DoD components are going to have to put into effect. Do you think those are a good thing? And, if so, why or why not?
Pros and cons to it. So I think they're a good thing for so there's some relatively small DoD components with, $5 million to spend. I think for those, that's kind of tricky because they're going to get proposals all over the map. And so if I were a company and I was proposing on an open topic, I would more focus on agencies like MDA, Navy, Army, Air Force, the bigger ones where it's really defined and you have it. But my fear could be is you'll get, the percent will go down even more because you'll get so many people propose under that aren't hitting the mark. So it'll be interesting to find out, and we're going to have a GAO report that's going to study the value of that. The advantage is, and I had an open topic when I was at Navy, but it was open on manufacturing, was we get ideas that we didn't think about. So you get some interesting ideas that come in that are really game changers. So there's definitely pros and cons.
Okay. And another question here, kind of based off of something that is, I don't know, percolated or come out very recently with the announcement of the kind of newly formed Office of Strategic Capital. Do you think that that's going to influence the way the SBIR and STTR programs operate? Do you think they can be leveraged together for better commercial prospects for innovative tech?
So certainly the goal is to leverage them for better commercials. Well, yeah, and transition and things like that. So the individual that's heading up that organization was from AFWorks. The program has connection with us at SBA, so we've been involved with working with the development of that office, but it's also using the other side of my office, which is SBIC, which is a program that provides money to venture capital type organizations. And so the push is to do that in areas that provide advanced capability for the Department of Defense in areas, hypersonics, materials, and things that just not enough investment was going on. So with SBIR, it is limited. Again, it's next stage research, but it can only go so far. And in some places, you prove something out. Now you need to set up a manufacturing line. You need costs that typically couldn't be funded by or can't be funded by federal money. This concept could be bringing in private investment that could do that. So this is not all about, but certainly a lot about helping over that valley of death in a very focused way by the DoD that will rely more on non-traditional defense contractors, new businesses, commercial, and all that to really mature things and address their needs. So I think, yes, it's a very good thing.
Okay. And
more to come on it because it's just getting stood up, and how it'll impact SBIR, I think, will be something we'll watch.
Great. Now, you kind of mentioned that the NMFAST program does a lot of assistance and, helps people. And we oftentimes deal with people that look at SBIR and STTR almost like a mythbuster style. There are things that we always have to kind of correct people on. A big one that people really kind of take to heart is these programs seem too good to be true. The government doesn't take equity. You don't have to pay the money back, etc. What's the government goal in this? Why do they do this?
So government goal is, it's all true. It's not too good, but again, government always is looking, especially the U.S., and how do you bring along technology, especially because everyone, the argument is, you got all this venture capital money. Reality is venture capital funds very focused companies at very later stages. They want to see returns in 3 to 5 years. We're looking at much longer term tech. So, why I, said that, main companies in the biotech industry really started with SBIR. We're seeing things and investing in things that we know will grow, and that generates jobs, high-paying jobs, taxes, advances the U.S. And so that's why the program is so important, is to make sure that federal funding is going to as many great ideas as possible. And why we at SBA push the program in FAST and other places is we know good ideas just don't come from white males in California and Boston. And we want to make sure, okay, what are we doing to reach out to the smartest people out there with these great ideas, making them aware of the program and getting them to apply so that we can provide that seed money to get that technology to mature to a stage where they can either go it on their own or other investors will engage. Too good to be true.
And kind of a curveball for you, because this is always, I think, a fun question for people to hear, particularly from people that are so ingrained into the innovation ecosystem. But, just personally, for John Williams, what's your favorite thing about the SBIR and STTR programs?
So it was more when I was in Navy, and it was working individually with the companies and really, hands-on and trying to work with them to solve their problems and finding those additional resources, going to the companies and working with the entrepreneurs. But at SBA, it's exciting. It's just been, I don't think this is a shocker, but Congress has been a little challenging, influential, but I love working with policy to really provide things that make a difference to bring on underrepresented. So I'm really focused on what can we do? I don't think we're getting enough resources. I'm really happy that FAST and Growth Accelerator have almost doubled in the last couple of years. But I know we should be doing more to really help all those bright minds have access to this federal funding. And that's real important. And that drives me right now.
Great. And I think that's going to finish us up for the Q&A.
Yeah.
So thank you, John.
I appreciate it. Send my slides to whoever wants them.
Yep.
Thanks for all you do, Dal. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, John. Those are some great remarks, and that keynote was wonderful and really helped set the tone for today. Now, let's dive into our first panel. During the panel, also, please feel free to send in questions for the Q&A portion, just like some of you just did, using the chat function on the right-hand side of the stage. The SBIR and STTR programs are the largest sources of non-dilutive funding available to small businesses and one of the best ways to help you move further towards the commercial market. However, between varying proposal requirements, different defining characteristics of innovation, and knowing agency focal points, it can be hard to navigate the process and create a complete and compelling proposal. In the panel you're about to hear, you're going to hear from agency representatives, reviewers, assistance providers, and even awardees on how to navigate this process as a first-time applicant, but you will even learn things if this is your 10th time applying. I would like to now welcome our moderator, Eldon Hawks, to the stage. Eldon has a long history that includes work for the USDA. Now Eldon serves as the Partnership and Innovation Specialist at the SBA, a role that supports the advancement of the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs. His primary duties include managing the agency's federal and state technology partnership program. And he will be joined by panelists Henry Ahn, Dana Catron, Jim Greenwood, and Rock Hart. Eldon, the floor is yours.
That's okay.
Looks like we lost Eldon.
Eldon, you with us?
His smile is permanently frozen.
So it's like Eldon is drawn. Let's go ahead and while Eldon tries to get finalized there, if everyone could kind of go around the horn, introduce yourself, and let's do an opening question with what's your favorite thing about the SBIR and STTR programs? Henry, if you want to get us started off.
Sure. My name is Henry Ahn. By the way, there's a little bit of echo, Dale. I don't know if it's...
Yes, for everyone, if you could please turn on your echo cancellation and the gear icon.
Oh. Hello? Oh, that's better.
Yeah.
All right. That's better. I can focus a little better. All right. So my name's Henry Ahn. I'm one of the program directors at NSF for the SBIR STTR program. I manage the biomedical technologies topic. And I've been here for about 6.5 years as the NSF SBIR STTR program director. What's my favorite thing about SBIR STTR? Well, I mean, it's money that companies can utilize without having to give up equity. So I think my interaction, I've worked as a seed investor in the past, but my interaction with the company is definitely I think a lot more pleasant since we're giving money where companies don't have to worry about paying back. And I really do enjoy interacting with all the applicants, the reviewers, and everyone's just so smart, and I have a lot to learn from them. So it's never boring. There's always something to learn. So that's one of the few things that I guess I do enjoy about the SBIR STTR program. And those of you who are new to the SBIR STTR program, I just want to emphasize that each agency does have different emphasis. So for NSF, it's seed stage companies and startups. So companies generally have to be very early. So if you do have any questions, I would like to encourage you to reach out to us anytime. We're generally very approachable, and we'd be more than happy to clarify anything or answer questions that you may have along the way. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Henry. Dana?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Dana Catron. I am Deputy Director of Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University, and I'm also the SBIR Program Director for our NMFAS program. And what excites me, we work with a lot of very early stage technologies and clients who are very, very early in their commercialization path. And for high risk early stage technologies, SBIR and STTR, in my opinion, is really one of the only sources of funding that these clients and startups can tap into. It's non-dilutive, equity-free, and it really can kickstart the technology commercialization process. So I love these programs. I'm really excited today to talk a little bit more about them. And thank you, Del.
Thank you, Dana. And Rock.
Hi, and pretty humbled to be part of this.
Pretty humbled to be part of this.
Is there a lot of feedback coming on your side?
Yeah,
Did it stop?
that's better.
Okay, something happened. I didn't touch anything, I swear. So we were first-time applicants, and we had talked to a lot of different agencies, and basically, for us, because it was like a brand new industry, which really even had PhDs scratching their head on how to proceed, and of course, you know, when it's a brand new type of industry, your seed investors are few and far between because they haven't seen anything like this before, and there's nothing to show that it will work and or make money. So for us, it was kind of a nice validation that you know, somebody from the government side, you know what, this has potential, and from a small business point of view, when you mentioned that you got a grant, you know, for us from the NSF, it opened doors. People were listening to us, and that does make a difference in the long run. So in short, that's what we loved about it.
Great. Thanks, Rock. It looks like Jim actually dropped off. So let's go ahead and get started with the panel here. So everyone, we have, well, Jim's back. Jim, if you want to go ahead and take a crack at answering the question.
Sure. Jim Greenwood, President, Greenwood Consulting Group. I've been involved in SBIR since the inception of the program back in the 80s, STTR in the 90s. Taught webinars, workshops around the country, work with a variety of entrepreneurs, part of the Department of Energy's Phase Zero program, coaching and consulting with small businesses. Favorite thing about SBIR, it's a level playing field. I have entrepreneurs who come to me and they found some federal offering, and it's open to small and large businesses, federal labs, universities, foreign governments, and they qualify. You know, they're in there. And I say, but look at your competition. You're going to be up against Johns Hopkins, you're going to be up against Sandia National Laboratory. You don't have the resources these people have. You're going to get squished like a grape. And frankly, some of those programs are pretty, let's just say, politically motivated. SBIR is a level playing field. It's only you and your fellow small businesses. Now, some of them are quite large. Some of them are quite adept at winning at SBIR, but it's not the really big players. And the decisions are more based on merit rather than politics. So that's my favorite thing about SBIR STTR.
That is a perfect answer, Jim. Thank you very much. So, you kind of heard, or for the audience, and if you were backstage, you kind of heard John mention this during his opening remarks that there's a lot of different variation between the agencies. There's 11 different agencies that utilize the SBIR and STTR programs. And there can be a lot of differences between them, whether it's the research focus, period of performances, funding levels, proposal specifications. Each one of them kind of takes their own vein, their own approach, and those differences and that nuance is something that people oftentimes don't pick up. So, given that, what are a few differences that you think are key to know, and why is that important for an applicant to actually understand? We had Henry start us off, so let's actually reverse our order here and have Jim start us off.
All right. Yeah, there are tons of differences. A good friend who used to be a NSF program director says there's only two commonalities among the SBIR agencies. They all call it SBIR, and it all has three phases, and otherwise they do everything different. A major difference is an agency like Henry's, where he's supporting good ideas. Bring him a good idea that has merit, has commercial potential, is a good innovation, you're well qualified, he's interested in it. You go to the military and they say, look, all I want to see is something that solves the following problem. I've got a mission, I've got a problem accomplishing the mission. Warfighter's life is at jeopardy if I don't solve the problem. So it's a difference of night and day between how Henry and the DoD would treat an SBIR opportunity, if you will. So in Henry's case, it's bring me ideas, let's advance new ideas. In the case of the military, it's let's solve problems.
And Rock, kind of same question for you. And this is actually, I think, interesting for you from the applicant and the awardee side is, what's something that you think was important for you to know?
So and I'll go back to a couple programs I had been involved in at NMSU that trained me to interview customers and everyone within the problem. And in that, I basically just took that exact same philosophy that you learned through the NSFI core training that we had gone through. And what I did was I applied it to everyone who I was looking at for a potential grant. And really listened and read what they were looking for. They'll tell you what they want, and either you have it or you don't. I don't think they want you wasting their time just by using the shotgun approach and hopefully something hits. Although in our particular case, it was kind of cool because we knew our innovation. And we had done our innovation, which kind of shot ourselves in the foot because then they didn't want to fund our innovation because we did it. So then it came down to, what else did we have? But we had innovation within the innovation, which was something that interested them. And so here we are.
I think that's an excellent answer, Rock. Dana, from your standpoint, and particularly kind of having a focus across all of the different agencies as a support organization, what do you think is really important for people to understand about those differences and why it can really affect an applicant?
Sure. So from the assistance side, what we really try to emphasize with clients is, and John kind of touched on this in his keynote, is they're completely different programs, right? And so From the proposal development side, and that's primarily where we come in, is to help develop those strong proposals. It's really, really critical for a startup, for somebody who's going after this funding, to know maybe you are a fit for 2, 3, maybe even 4 different agencies, right? Your technology can fit within multiple agencies, but really understanding, okay, well, if I'm going to apply to DoD at this time, what do I need to be preparing to apply to NSF or to the other agencies, and how do you organize and plan out how you're going to, put in all these different proposals if you're doing multiple proposals. And that's something that I think a lot of, especially first-time applicants, also don't understand, is you can submit multiple proposals to different agencies as long as you're not getting funded by multiple agencies for the same project, right? And so understanding those nuances, and then really understanding what do the agencies want in that proposal package, because like Jim mentioned, every single one is very different. And so there's different requirement, there's different forms, there's different submission platforms that you may need to submit it on. There's different registrations. And so really understanding and being prepared. And one of the things we really coach when we're working with applicants is, if you even think you might be interested in, say, DoD or whatever those agencies are, just get registered. They're free. It doesn't hurt to be registered for all of the different agencies. And then when it comes time to get that proposal together, you're already, one step ahead. So again, we have, through our NM Fast program, and I know a lot of the other FAST sites throughout the country have developed many, many different resources for all of the specific agencies, again, because they're different. And you can tap into those and really see what the differences are and make sure you're prepared.
That's an excellent point there, Dana. Henry, I'd like to take a little bit of a different vein to the question to you, because you are part of an agency. And Jim kind of clued in the audience a little bit in his answer when he talked about NSF. But for NSF, what is something that you think sets your agency apart from the other ones? And how does that potentially affect the way that someone applying to the NSF, SBIR, and STTR programs might change their approach?
Yeah, so I guess the question's not all that different. So, I mean, as you know, NSF is technology agnostic. So it really doesn't matter what type of technology it is, as long as the innovation is there and the technology that the company is trying to develop, and as long as the commercial potential is there, there's probably a fit somewhere within the topics that we have. When in doubt, just submit project pitch under other topics, and we'll review and we'll get back to you and we'll let you know exactly where you need to go. So that's so in some ways that's good, but and as Jim mentioned, we come in very early too, and he mentioned ideas, and I would say if it's just an idea, maybe it may still be a little too early for NSF, but an idea with sufficient evidence that the technology has the potential to work, maybe that's still okay. So what I think it sets NSF apart is that because of our emphasis on startups and very early stage companies, we don't really have companies that have been around for a long time. And most of the applicants, most of the phase one awardees, they're receiving phase one for the first time. I think the past several years or so, about 60% of our phase one awardees were receiving a phase one from any agency. So this is the very first recipient of SBI or STTR. Multiple phase ones, probably not very common. We don't have many phase one awardees that have already gotten multiple phase ones, either through NSF or other agencies. So if a company has a long history of being in business or have raised significant amount of money, it's generally a good idea. I mean, technically, yes, they may still meet the eligibility criteria of a small business to be able to potentially submit and be considered for SBIR through NSF, but it's always a good idea for them to let us know how this phase one funding from NSF will work as a catalyst for this company. So that's one of our criteria, whether this SBIR funding will serve as a catalyst for the company. So unless the company has a good reason as to how this can happen, that this phase one funding can really be significant for the startup, it's probably not likely that the company will receive funding.
Nice. Thank you very much, Henry. So there's a lot of, again, kind of those differences and nuance that go on there. And one of the things that is different is the ability to talk to an agency program manager. When you can talk to them, what you can talk to them about, kind of the questions that you can ask them. But we've all heard how important it is to at least open up those lines of dialogue, have that conversation, get those lines of communication going. So along those lines, what is something that you think, or what's a driver that you think is important to get those communication lines going? And what's one thing that everyone should try to learn during an initial call with a program manager? Let's do some round robin here. Well, Dana, start us off.
Okay. Well, again, coming at it from the assistance org perspective, one of the best tips I have is going back to elementary school and learning to listen, right? So when you have a call scheduled, and it may be a one-on-one session like today, or it may be a phone call or a Zoom meeting, or maybe in person, whatever it may be, you're not going to have a ton of time with that program manager, and they're going to be talking to a lot of other startups as well. And so one of the things we really try to emphasize to our clients is use that time. It's very valuable time to listen to what that program manager has to say and really absorb, and don't take up their time by doing all of the talking, right? Because then you're not going to get as much out of that meeting. And so some of the things we do to prepare, quad charts are an excellent exercise for startups to really get you into the frame of mind of, what are those important points that I need to emphasize to the program manager. And the nice thing about those too is you can send them out before your meeting. So you can email those before your meeting so they're prepared, even a one pager, things like that, just so they know in advance what is your technology, what are you trying to do. And I would say for the meeting itself, trying to see and verify. Obviously they're not going to say yes, we're going to fund this with, they can't say that, but they can say, well, this is a really good fit within our mission and topic area, and we're interested in this. Or maybe it's not. And that's also really great feedback, right? Because putting a proposal together takes a lot of time. So you as a startup would want to know if you're not a good fit for that agency. So.
And I'm glad you brought up the quad chart, Dana. For anyone that doesn't know, the NMFAS team recently ran a quad chart webinar, and you can watch a recording on the NMFAS YouTube channel, where, of course, we will be posting all the recordings from today's event, cutting out any weird technical glitches, but a streamlined video for the end there. But I'd like to pose the same question to you, Brock, but a little bit different since you are an awardee. Did you have trouble opening up those lines of communication with, program managers at agencies, and what's something you covered?
No, it wasn't hard. I mean, I think if you are applying for a grant, you should know the most about your technology possible and be able to communicate that technology in as quick a time as possible to get their attention. And then read their body language. I mean, Dana was saying, listen, they'll tell you what they're interested in, what they're not interested in. And when you give them your pitch, it needs to be done quickly, precisely, and you should know your stuff more than anybody. You should be able to impress them. They shouldn't be asking you questions that you've not heard or thought of before. And so in that regard, when we approach them, and again, I don't mean to keep plugging the NMSU program, but it puts you in touch with all of the experts in the United States. And when you're talking to all of the experts, you're getting nuances from every. Next thing you know, you are the expert in that department. So when you go to that person, you know your stuff and they're impressed with it. And in particular, if you've done a little bit of legwork, it shows them that you're willing and can do what they would invest in. Did I answer the question?
I think you definitely did.
Okay.
All right, and let's go with Henry. Let's actually ask you this same question. Again, a little bit of a different focus, because I think it's important for you to kind of cover it from the agency perspective.
Yeah.
Why is it critical for you that open communication, good dialogue with awardees, or heck, even just applicants, is a critical factor? And what do you think is a question that everybody should be asking you when they have that initial call or that initial meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions tend to vary depending on the situation. But in terms of a fit, Dana mentioned about the fit within a program, and people can generally get to that answer when they submit a project pitch to NSF. So for NSF, the fit is basically after they hear back from the project pitch. When they hear back, they'll know whether there's a fit or not, and if so, who the program director is that they can reach out to ask questions. So when people reach out to me, I think part of my job is to answer all the questions, clarify things if certain things are not clear, so that companies can submit some good proposals. It's a win-win for everyone. Companies are happy, they get funded. My reviewers are happy because they get to review some really good proposals, and I'm happy because we got to fund some great companies. So my goal is to answer questions. When companies ask me for time and schedule a call, my thought is, okay, this entrepreneur has questions, so I need to go and clarify these things. One thing that I would ask not to do is to just call, just to talk. And I've actually had a call scheduled with somebody, and as soon as I got on the call, the person just told me that he didn't have any question. He said, hey, this person that I'm working with told me that I need to call the program manager and talk to that person. So that's why I called, but I don't have any questions. Do you want to hear about my technology? And I said, well, yeah, I'll get to learn all about it when you submit your full proposal. So I don't really have to hear about it now, but I really want to be able to help you to prepare a better proposal if you have any questions. So so the conversation didn't go very far because he didn't have any question and he wasn't on our website either, I guess, to read all the details. So the one thing that I think would be helpful is if a company goes to our website, I mean, as they go through all the contents, such as the solicitation is really thick. So as they go through that information and as they start looking into our program and looking into the steps involved in submitting the proposal, I'm sure they'll have questions along the way. And I think just coming to the calls or meetings with those calls, I think will definitely be helpful. And we also do have separate Q&A sessions, Q&A webinars. We generally do this every other week or so. So they can always sign up to be on this separate Q&A webinar if they are working on some technologies that are specific to biomedical technologies. And if they want to connect with me, they can always email me and we can go through those questions that they may have.
Great, excellent answer, Henry. Jim, very similar lines for you, with you helping a lot of different applicants over many, many years and your experience with SBIR and STTR. What would you say is something that is critical about those communication lines, and what's something that you think everybody should be asking a question of for an agency program manager?
Yeah, I think it's critical to establish the dialogue in advance, if at all possible, before you get into the proposal. And I think to Dana's point, even before you decide whether it makes sense to write the proposal or not, I think Rock talked about body language, and part of that is very important. How does that conversation go? And if they seem to be really disinterested, or where are you coming from, or I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, you're getting some bad body language that says maybe this is not a good fit. There's also that situation where you hang up the phone and you go, what a bunch of buffoons. I mean, these people are complete bozos in this agency. Well, then why would you want to write a proposal to them if you think that they're that far off track? They're probably thinking the same thing about you, by the way. that's not going to be a good relationship. So you don't want to have that conversation. In terms of what you asked, let me spin it a little bit differently, because it's a balancing act of asking things, but not until you've given enough background that they can answer intelligently, but also not spending all the time giving them background. So I have people who get on there and they've got 15 minutes and they spend 13 minutes telling the program officer what their technology is all about. And then by that point, the program officer is pretty well bored, lost, wherever they are by that point. And there's no time really for a conversation. The other extreme is I just get on, well, Henry, what do you want? And Henry said, well, I'm here to fund innovation. And he said, well, what kind of innovation are you interested in, Henry? And they're asking Henry things that he, is too basic for his agency. He needs to know what you're thinking so he can react to whether that's something he's interested in or not. So it's important to do the dialogue, and I think people have to prepare for putting enough information out there that the agency can react to it, but also not so much that they're dominating the conversation. The other thing I would add, Dell, is just be prepared for anywhere from a terrific conversation to being completely stood up. Some folks are extremely helpful in the agencies, willing to talk, want to give you information, probably want to spend more time with you than you want to spend with them. And then there are others, they cop the attitude, hey, it'd be unfair for me to talk to you. Because I will tell you things that your competitors won't know. Well, then that means you're not going to get anything out of them and won't have that opportunity. So you got to be ready for anywhere in between, anywhere from getting incredibly good information to being stood up, but you got to try anyway, with the hope that you're going to get the former rather than the latter.
I think that's a really great answer there, Jim, and I think you kind of encapsulated a lot of what was discussed. If I could probably put a pin in this question, it seems like it's really important to have that conversation, but come into that conversation prepared. Plan out what you want to ask, plan out what you want to address, plan out what you think is important for you to know about that agency, that topic area, that focus, that fit. Whatever is that big guide there that is allowing you to make that decision that this agency, this topic, my innovation. Speaking of planning and preparation, though, for each one of you in your own eyes, how much planning and preparation goes into a good proposal for SBIR or STTR? And why do you think it takes that amount of time? And what's something everyone should do? Let's start off actually with Rock on this one.
I think you called on me because you saw me thinking and I wasn't ready. So I've kind of alluded to it already. I mean, you're approaching an agency, and they're showing some interest. You've not wasted their time. You've been prepared to show them exactly what you have and what you're looking to do. In my particular case, and I think I would do a little video. I mean, videos just solve so many things that words just can't do, and that really made it a big deal. Once you know, and I'll say customer, because I do think of the agencies like a customer. You need to treat them like a customer. You need to know where they're coming from, and when you're writing up that proposal, really for us it was really easy. We knew where we were coming from. We already knew how to get there. It was, and yet I didn't expect to get anything back. It was kind of one of those things. Is like, in a startup you're told no so many times, and in this particular case though, I felt very confident about what they wanted, what we had to present, and so putting that proposal together went really quick because we knew our problem, we knew the money, and we had a plan. And I think in that particular case, they like to hear that. So putting all of that together, that technology of how you're going to take it to the next step to a customer and solve a potential national or world problem, I think impresses people who are willing to invest in you.
Well, even though you had to sit there and think of it, that was a really great answer, Rob.
Thanks.
Now let's go with Jim for your response. Trying to switch it up on who goes after who, so be on your toes, guys.
Doing a good job, Dale. Thank you. It reminds me of that, and I'm paraphrasing, but Abe Lincoln was asked, how long should a person's legs be? And he responded, just long enough to reach the ground from the body to the ground. And I think this is kind of the same answer, because how long does it take to prepare a proposal? It takes as long as it needs to be from where you are right now to having a full proposal prepared. And for some of you, it's an idea that's been in the back of your mind for years. You've done a lot of research on it. Maybe it was in your thesis. You've got your team all lined up. You've been working on this thing for years, and it's really just pulling the pieces together and getting it down on paper, putting it all the forms, shooting it in. Then there are others that are just brand new to this, and they've got nothing. And I know, Henry, you see these folks all the time where they've never written a proposal, so they don't have a bio, they don't have any of the paperwork down, they're not registered on anything, and they're going to involve a university that they've never worked with before, and they kind of know somebody there from a conference they met them. And you look at that and you go, man, this is going to be a while for this to pull together. And then there are those that just can sit down at a keyboard and just spit out text just instantly. And then there are those that pour over it and they draft it and they revise it and they massage it, and just so very many variables. And I know that's completely no help to anyone trying to figure out what it's going to take to do one of these. But the bottom line is, to me, is you sit down, and now's a great time of the year because the holidays are here and things are a little bit slower. You sit down and you say, by darn it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to finally do this. And you sit down and you get the instructions out and you get the forms and you start working on it. And you put together a proposal. Whatever it's going to take, you put it together. And you put together what's called a decent proposal. It doesn't have to be a perfect proposal. A decent proposal. You're not embarrassed about sending it in. Shoot it in. See what happens. Chances are real good, and John Williams told you a while ago, 19%, so roughly 1 in 5 of these is going to hit. Chances are real good you're going to get a rejection. But with that rejection, you're going to get some feedback. And now you got a pretty good draft proposal that you can work with the next time and revise and maybe resubmit if it's an agency like Henry's or NIH's or USDA's. Or even if it's an agency you can't resubmit, you've learned some things, and now you write your second proposal and you get better at it and you keep getting better at it. So part of it is just dedicating yourself to deciding, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this proposal together and I'm going to submit it before that January 5th deadline at NIH. And you do it and you see what happens. So you got to be doing the tennis shoe commercial, right? Just do it.
I think you gave us a really good catchphrase there, Jim. Too bad it's somebody else's catchphrase. Don't want to copyright infringement.
No.
Dana, very similar kind of approach to the question with you here, because I know for the NMFAST program, you always like to give people a rough estimate of how long it takes, particularly for the first time proposal. And why does NMFAST quote that number? And what's something that everybody should be kind of taken to heart when they're thinking of that number? And obviously start off with, what is that number?
Sure, yeah. So the number, it's actually a range, but we generally say for first-time applicants, so if you've never put together a federal proposal before, whether or not it's for SBIR or STTR, at least 100 hours. More like, I would say 120 would be a more conservative number. And the reason why is the things that Jim cited, Rock cited. There's a lot of, it's not just the time you're sitting down typing out the narrative, right? There are a lot of different pieces to a proposal package besides the proposal itself. And so taking into account the time it's going to take you to get all your forms together. If you're subcontracting or working with another entity, the time it takes to negotiate that. If you're on an STTR, definitely more than 120 hours, because you will be working with that university or research institution very closely to get those agreements in place and things like that. But there are a lot of different tools and resources that many different organizations have developed to kind of help manage those hours. And so from our side, we've been doing federal proposals for many, many years. And so our clients actually have the benefit of learning from our mistakes. And so we've developed a lot of different resources that have helped us internally at Arrowhead put together strong proposals. So things like a reverse calendar, super helpful. It's really easy to do. You don't need any fancy software or anything. You can just jot it down on a piece of paper if you want. But writing down when is that proposal due, and then backing up and saying, okay, well, if it's due on the 15th, I need to have all of these things done. And that gives yourself kind of a timeline for making sure you're on track to submit before. And actually, a big tip is don't actually put the deadline, maybe due at least a day or two before the deadline, because inevitably you may run into some issues when you're actually submitting. Other things like compliance matrices, checklists, things like that really help. And for FAST, if you just go to our NMFAST website, we have all of those documents for every single agency, and we update them with every solicitation cycle. So whether or not you're in New Mexico, it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and download those resources. Another tip, and my background is in federal grant writing. And so one thing that we find incredibly helpful, and it helps, it hurts the first time you do it, but then it helps when you're submitting future proposals, is come up with boilerplate text. So you will always have some text that'll remain mostly the same across all different, proposals. Things like your team or your technology, the description of your technology, your mission, all of those different kinds of things. Develop that, and then you can use it over and over again, tweaking it again for the different agencies, the different solicitations, things like that. And then my last tip for this is build in time for review. I can't stress how critical having your proposal reviewed is. I know Jim can attest to this, and probably Henry too. It's critical that feedback you get from an external party who isn't super close to what you've put together can really help your proposal and catch gaps or mistakes that you may have overlooked, because you're so entrenched in the process. It's really easy to overlook something. So always build in, we usually say at least a week or two, preferably 2 or 3 weeks for review, and that can really help make it a strong proposal package.
That was a very expansive and great answer, Dana. Henry, with you being last in line here, I'd like to pose this question to you and just ask you, from an agency perspective, do you agree with what your other panelists have said? And is there anything that you think was critical that they missed in their answers?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do agree. It takes a long time. I wish there was a better way to do this. But we need to have enough details to be able to evaluate. So whether it's on the technology side or commercial side, enough details need to be there for us to say, hey, their approach is this, it makes sense, does not make sense because of these reasons. So I don't know if there's a better way to do this. We're always looking for ways to do things better, maybe a little simpler, but we haven't found a way to do it, I guess, much better. And I know when people are looking at this for the first time, I know some people are overwhelmed with all the information that they have and all the guideline that we provide in the solicitation. And Dana mentioned about reviewing the document. I think that's also very important, because we've seen many times where documents are clearly written by different people and put together, and some of the information presented are not consistent. So you don't want to have these inconsistencies or contradicting statements, whether it's the approach or on the technical side, even the market size. I think sometimes it's very different. So I think having consistency or just not repeating the same phrases over and over throughout the document that I think the reviewers tend not to like that because they're going through a lot of different documents, and if they have to read the same paragraph multiple times, I guess, as long as all the details are there, I guess in the end it probably wouldn't matter, but you have limited space to put in as much detail as possible. It doesn't help you to repeat things, and the reviewers generally, because of all the information that they have to review, if they have to read the same paragraphs over and over, they tend not to like that process as much.
I think that's a really great kind of summary answer for us there, Henry. And if I could put a pin on kind of this question, I think one of the things that seemed to be addressed by everybody, and we've heard this time and time again in previous summits, we've had other keynote speakers like Bob Smith from the Navy, who biggest piece of advice to people is always read the instructions. So I think that's a big thing for people. And one of the factors that can take time is you have to read the instructions, you have to understand what goes into it, you have to plan it out, you have to have the knowledge. And as Dana highlighted, you have to give others time to review. Henry even backed that up. Give it to somebody who does not know the idea in and out, hasn't lived, breathed your innovation, somebody from the outside, and see if it's put together well. See if it actually makes sense to them. So for our audience, we have about 25 minutes left in our panel here. We want to leave around roughly 15 minutes for Q&A, so please continue to send those questions into the chat. We will have time to address questions. But let's continue on with our panel questions here. We've done a lot of talking about tools, assistance, resources for applicants, those first-time applicants, critical knowledge. Let's take a tiny step back. And the SBIR and STTR programs are often referred to as America's Seed Fund. But I'd like to ask our esteemed panel here, what does the idea of SBIR and STTR as a seed mean to you? What's something you think people should be aware of in growing their innovation and moving it forward with the idea of seeding technology in mind? Ultimately, what do you think can grow from those? And it kind of does link to our last question because it was all about time. It's very long, very kind of in-depth process. And while seeding, you don't just plant a seed and it grows overnight. You have to water it. You have to nurture it. So as a seed, what do you think SBIR and STTR does to nurture ideas? Let's start off with Jim on this one.
Yeah, you saw me writing, so he got me this time, Rock. So he's pretty good at finding us when we're not quite ready there. A couple of things. One is I want to distinguish kind of how Henry looks at seed versus the way some of the other agencies look at seed, because I want to make sure for newcomers that they realize there's two different perspectives here. Henry's perspective, I think, is more seeding new companies, seeding the entrepreneurs, seeding the early stage companies. So he's very interested in the newcomers, the folks that are just organizing their companies and so on. Other agencies you'll hear, I don't care how old your company is, I want to see new ideas being seeded, innovation being seeded, something that someone hasn't tried before being seeded. So I want to, if any of our participants today are not newcomers in terms of starting company, realize that this is a difference you're going to see across agencies. And if you're not a newcomer in terms of the age of your company, you need to talk to the agency and see if they're okay with that or not. What you're seeding overall with SBIR is, in my opinion, the birth of a new business or the growth of a business, a major step if you're an existing company, because you've been dilly-dallying along, got a few contracts, got a few sales, and suddenly this grant or contract is going to be dumped in your lap with basically you are to do something new, exciting, different, beyond what others have done. So you're no longer just a little company plodding along. You're now, as Rock was pointing out, you're now leading in this area. You may be making yourself the world-renowned expert in this area. So you're really changing yourself and you're changing your company. And as you get into phase 2 and beyond, then you're presumably growing that company and also getting more into long-term revenue from commercialization. And of course, that can mean very different things in many different types of companies. But it means you're not just getting a phase 1 grant or contract and a phase 2 contractor grant and then go back and get another contractor grant and get another contractor grant. No, you're taking this contractor grant, SBIR, and commercializing it and creating a revenue stream for yourself, so that you now are using that as part of the base of your company. Then you can go out and get other contracts and grants if you want to, build other parts of the base over time. So I think it's an exciting time for a small company, a startup company in some cases, to take it to the next level and really decide we're going to compete at the national level, even international level, at the stage of being on the leading edge of new ideas, new technology, and also with the opportunity, hopefully, to grow a more stable and successful business long term. So it's a very exciting area of seeding.
That was a very comprehensive answer, Jim. I hope our other panelists can also respond in kind. So, Henry, let's go with you.
Sure.
And picking on you here because, NSF always likes to throw around the term seed. What does
Yeah,
seed mean to NSF?
sure. I mean, Jim provided a very, very good comprehensive summary of all agencies, including NSF, I thought. So, but as far as NSF goes, I mean, we see seed as giving startups and very early stage companies a chance to be able to continue to grow. So I'm sure you've heard of the term the valley of death, the point where many companies die because of lack of cash flow. They're just way too early for private investors to come in, even angel investors to come in, and yet they have to make progress, but they're running out of money. The way NSF sees this seed fund is that we want to be able to bridge that gap as much as possible. So if a company is still trying to de-risk their technology sufficiently so that they can actually go back to these angel investors or VCs that they've been talking to or they are about to talk to and convince them that they have something that's worth investing in. So that's where I think we believe that NSF seed funding should really come in to give these startups a chance to be able to continue to grow. If a company has already gone through, we periodically see this, by the way, where a company comes in and says, in the proposal, it says, hey, we just raised a $10 million Series A. And we're doing all these things, and we want to just kind of more or less experiment with another technology that we had in mind. And I guess going back to Jim's definition, I guess if there's an agency that really wants that other technology, the topic may be of interest to some other agencies. But with NSF, because of our emphasis on the startups and very early stage companies, we believe that company will be able to continue to operate. They're probably financially stable, probably not going to have any problem doing what they need to continue to grow as a for-profit company. So perhaps this is not the type of seed that NSF has in mind, versus some technology that's just starting out. So we look at the company as a whole and whether our money can help the company to be able to continue to grow. I know with most of the companies that I work with under biomedical technologies, they will have to go out, find strategic partners, find private investors for them to be able to continue to grow. They probably can't do without it. I know many of the software companies, they may be able to get to some meaningful revenue even after completing the project with us, the phase 1 after phase 1. So depending on what that company's need might be, we want to be able to help them to achieve those technical milestones that are critical so that they will be able to continue to grow beyond this stage that they may be trying to get over.
Great. Thanks, Henry. Rock, I'm going to pose the question to you, but in a little bit of a different nuance with you being an awardee. For you, what do you think that the SBIR and STTR program and your award under an SBIR has done to seed your idea and seed you getting further towards the commercial market?
Well, and I might even go backwards a little bit. We already knew the commercial market and that no one had done it. We knew the money, how much was being spent on the problem, and we were able to go to our program director and point that out and them realize that and recognizing that, and in particular for my company, it was very.
Oh,
I think we lost Rock.
now it's Rock. Who's next?
The wonder of virtual platforms. So
We'll never know what very was. I mean, I'm hanging on the edge here.
Well, hopefully Rock can finish that thought off when he gets back in. But while we wait for Rock,
Did I lose you guys?
Yeah, you lost us. We heard very, and then you froze.
I cannot hear you.
Are you there, Rock?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, how much did you lose? How much
We
more
heard-
can I redo that I did wrong?
We heard very, and then you totally froze up.
Oh, okay. So just to kind of recap, we knew the business, we knew the money, we knew the problem, and the national and potential world problem, and then being able to take it into a business. I think, in particular, our program director really liked that we were able to link the technology and the agriculture, which often don't come together too well sometimes. And it's still not coming to, I mean, it's really convincing. And I think I said cowboy hats and technology and software people coming together. That's a weird world. So being able to merge the two together and be able to convince that yeah, this is a definite worldwide need problem, and it's a business was huge. The seed money got us through. Yet at the same time, when Henry was signed, we cannot stop looking for angel investors. There are so many aspects of this technology that the grant won't cover. So you have to find other ways to cover it. And so when you have multiple disciplines coming together, it funds one part of the discipline. Definitely puts a feather in your cap for angel investors. But you've got it. It's a constant. You can't quit. It's a constant movement to stay afloat, particularly after the pandemic and the supply chains. It's a very challenging time to stay afloat right now.
Great, thanks, Rock. And Dana, from your perspective, particularly with working with so many applicants, so many awardees over time, with the awards that the NMFAST program has helped people with, what do you think that those did to kind of seed technology, or what do you think is a hallmark for SBIR and STTR programs when it comes to them being a seed fund?
Sure. So I think working with a lot of startups, it's very easy for them to get discouraged, especially when you're working on a very early stage technology. There are so many unknowns, risks. It's a lot of time, money, and so I think the government, the emphasis behind these programs is really they're looking at the end goal, right? And if you think of, I was thinking of some really bad, seed analogies, but last year I visited the redwood forest on my way back to Seattle, which is where I'm from, and to see those trees, I mean they're huge, 250 feet large trees, right? But when you back up and think about it, they started from a seed that's smaller than your fingernail, right? And it's hard to see, especially I think for startups who are you're in the trenches. It's really hard to see what that technology can evolve into. And so I think the SBIR and its TTR programs, it's seed fund, right? It's there to help kickstart and get get your technology closer to, to that mature redwood, right? Again, really bad analogy, but but yeah, working with clients, we try to really emphasize that it sucks. We know it's really hard. We've been through, the grant process before too. We've cried and stayed up all night. Dell and I have pulled all-nighters writing proposals. But the reward of going through that process and getting that seed funding can really help your startup, really can help your technology and get you one step closer. Henry mentioned the Valley of Death. It can help bridge that. And it can kind of have a cascade effect, right? So once you get that phase one, we've seen enormous success with getting other phase ones, phase twos, going into phase threes. So I guess from my perspective, I see the programs as really, trying to focus on that end goal and support technologies when they're the most vulnerable and when they're they need that seed funding to get them to the next stage.
Well, and I would actually argue with you on one of the things that you stated, Dana, because I think your analogy was actually almost a perfect analogy. These programs are seeds. People have to essentially bury them, but they have to be nurtured, they have to be developed. People have to take care of them. And I think that you actually hit on a really great analogy there with the redwoods because there are some major international multi-billion-dollar companies that got their start with this seed program. Sonicare, 23andMe, although I don't think 23andMe is the actual company, it's the test. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Come on now. Symantec, iRobot. These are very, very, very large, very, very, very successful companies that used SBIR and STTR funding as a seed. They had an idea. They thought it was going to be amazing. They knew it had, like rock, had really great commercial potential, but they just needed that little bit of start to get over that hump. They needed that investment so that they could cross that valley of death. They needed that non-dilutive funding so that they weren't giving everything up to a venture capitalist and losing control of the business, losing control of the idea. That's what these programs are really about, is that ability to focus on what you want to do, what you want your company to be, the mission, how you want to develop your company, but in the vein of being successful, being commercially successful. Every one of you that's developing a company should have that in mind, right? You started a company because you want to be successful, but you also started a company because you have something to develop, you have something to grow, you have something to nurture. I think that's really important for us to remember when we think about these programs as a seed. So, soapbox out of the way and my soliloquy over. We're going to actually dive into a couple of audience questions here in the last little bit we have in our panel. We did have a couple of them that came in that I think are really important for us to address. The one that I'd really like to address, because it's something that I know as a support organization, NMFAS struggles with, had conversations with Jim about the struggle. One of the questions that came in from the audience was, is it beneficial to review previously successful proposals, or are each unique? I would actually like to put Henry on the spot in answering this one first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I know we've been asked in the past whether we have a sample proposal, and unfortunately, we don't have a sample proposal. And I would say in some cases, yes, it might be helpful. The way that somebody may have defined the market and the approach to commercialize the technology, for example, the way the milestones are laid out, with the milestones showing exactly what they're going to do, how they're going to go about achieving those milestones, success criteria to go along with them, maybe some potential pitfalls and alternative strategies. All those things I think could be helpful, but I don't think you'd necessarily need to review these previous proposals. with each solicitation, I think we tend to provide some little bit of a different type of information in the guideline too. So some things may change along the way, but one of the things that we try to do, I mean, provide as much detail as we can, and maybe in some ways may not necessarily be a good thing, because I guess some people get really confused with all the details that they see. But the guideline is very detailed, and so I think it would probably be helpful to just try to go through the guideline and try to put together as much information as possible, knowing that there will be somebody on the other side reading those details, and they need to be able to evaluate the technology. They can't, companies just cannot say we're going to build it and test it and see if it works better. They have to explain exactly how that's going to be accomplished and define what better means. So I think along the way, and some people are really good about providing all the details. Some people do need help. And I think Dell and Dana, and I'm sure you are able to, maybe provide some additional details for these companies that need those details, in more details to be incorporated. So I think they tend to be stronger. But I think the way the solicitation guideline is written, we try to put as much information there for people to know. These are the things that they need to include, so that if they decide to do this themselves, they know what type of information to include. But I think in some cases, some entrepreneurs are really good about those things. I think Rock probably didn't need any help, but I know some people, they definitely do need help. And sometimes I see companies coming back after after going through the review process, get declined for funding. They think they did a better job, but the proposal itself is not much better. And the ratings and review and this is even after the debriefing call that they may have had with me. And when I see something like that, I generally ask them, well, where do you live? Is there any support group? Is there any small business development centers? Is there any entrepreneur support groups near you who might be able to help you, or maybe review and help you understand a little better, help you improve your proposal? Because I think some people definitely do need help before their proposal becomes that much better, and or it becomes good enough to be funded, versus just struggling along the way. So I think it all varies, but yeah, so that's the way I see it. The samples are good. Don't try to copy. I know some people just try to copy the whole kind of formatting and all those things, but sometimes they're not as helpful. And depending on the type of company, the details will be very different too. So, sorry, that was a long answer.
That is totally fine, Henry. Would like to open it up to our other, esteemed and distinguished panelists there. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to Henry's response, or criticize his response, be combative, anything like that?
Realize none of these samples, if you ever see a sample, it is not a sample of a perfect proposal. It is a sample of a successful proposal. And for whatever reasons, it succeeded. And there's a whole variety of reasons why a proposal will succeed or fail. And this one just happened to succeed. So don't look at it and go, oh, I have to structure it exactly like this. And to Henry's point, if I just kind of boilerplate it and I white out NSF and I pencil in NIH, it'll win, it'll win. It just doesn't work that way. So don't treat it as a perfect proposal. If you can see the reviewer's comments, that's extremely helpful. And I appreciate NIH with their sample proposals, in many cases, also give you the reviewer's comments. So you can see some of the things that the reviewers didn't like. And once again, it reinforces that none of these things are perfect. Realize the instructions are constantly changing. I work a lot with the Department of Energy SBIR program, and they have a sample commercialization plan on their resources, and so many people follow the example that's provided, which is inconsistent with the current instructions. So they're following the example rather than the instructions. And let's go back to Bob Smith. You got to follow the instructions. They don't care that you saw a sample that is outdated. What they care is did you follow our instructions or not. And finally, I would just recommend, summarizing all of this, a critical review of a sample proposal. So take a look at it and say, wow, I really like the way Rock wrote that, the way he approached that. I'm going to use that in my proposal. And then you continue on and you go, man, I cannot believe that he got funded when he said that. That's something I would never say in my proposal. And you come up with your own style and your own proposal, maybe borrowing some things you think are good ideas from Rock and avoiding some of the things that you think he probably was lucky that didn't sink him.
Great. Anybody else while we are kind of getting ready for our transition here?
I'll add one last thing. I am by nature introvert, and so when I went through the NMSU programs, it was they put you up on stage, and you have to be able to think quick on your feet, and you have to be able to make a quick pitch to somebody who's never even knew there was this problem even existed. So then when it comes time to start doing your NSF or other agency proposals, you're ready. You know your stuff. And so I'm one of those people that can type something out in 5 minutes, and I think it's perfect until, like Dana said, have somebody read your stuff, because my stuff after somebody else, so what are we saying here? I'm not even sure. So I think it's really important to be able to have other people be critical reviewers of what you're doing. Don't be so quick to turn that thing in. And what I can write down in 5 minutes might take 2 weeks to go back through and make it clear. So that would just be my last.
Can I say one quick thing? I mean, and to add to what Jim said, can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So Jim mentioned about following the current solicitation, and I think I can't emphasize that enough. And it's been, what, more than a year since we went from phase 1 being 256K to 275K. I still receive proposals for 256K. And I don't know if they're getting that information from our old solicitation that's more than a year old, or from someone who's done this before, but they're just kind of leaving money on the table, but by not following the current solicitation.
I think that's a really kind of almost great point to end us with there, Henry, is, make sure that you're aware of the changes, make sure that you're aware of things that are happening, because you always want to capture as much funding as possible, because anything that you're leaving on the table is just something you're leaving on the table. It could actually be something great. It could be something really good for you. It could be something that further helps you get there and helps to allay a lot of different hurdles that you could come up with, or that you might actually come across. So I want to thank the panel here for being able to join us. Garrett is having a little bit of an issue, so we're going to actually transition to our next items on our schedule. So, again, thank everybody for that wonderful informational session. And we're going to take a short break, going to reset some of the systems. And in that break, we want to invite everybody to visit the expo hall, connect with others, or simply absorb some of the information you just heard. In the hall, we have booths from support organizations, research partners, and potential funders from across the country. Visit the booths, talk to their staff members, set up a meeting, and just find out more. You can also use the Connect feature on the left side of your screen to meet with other attendees to discuss potential partnerships, possible collaborative growth opportunities, and just ways that you can help each other, because that's really what these programs are about, being able to collectively and collaboratively move forward. Our next panel session is going to be starting at 10:50 a.m. Thanks, guys.